What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a new movie that was released through Neon recently on VOD. And I'm not sure if this film got a theatrical release. I didn't see it come near me to any of the theaters in my area. But as soon as I saw it released on VOD, I read the plot description and it sounded interesting. It was labeled as a queer comedy. And so I was really excited to watch this movie knowing virtually nothing about it at all. And the film I'm going to be discussing with you today is Stress Positions. Stress Positions is directed by Theda Hammel. Terry Goon is keeping strict quarantine at his ex-husband's Brooklyn brownstone while caring for his nephew, a 19-year-old model from Morocco named Balul. Bedridden in a full leg cast after an electric scooter accident, unfortunately for Terry, everyone in his life wants to meet the model. So I was very excited to watch this movie after reading the plot description and getting some information about it. And I thought this movie was funny and it was entertaining, but ultimately I don't think the movie worked for me as a whole. I think it's definitely worth watching and there are so many great moments, but it did not stick the landing for me whatsoever. There's some pacing issues with the movie, and I'll talk about all of that when I break the film down as a whole. So the film begins, we get some voiceover narration at the beginning of the movie, and we're introduced to all of this cast of characters. Our first character being Terry Goon, played by John Early, who has been going through a divorce or a separation with his husband, and is living in this brownstone that his husband has given to him now that he has fled and is now having these flings in Europe. And he currently is living there with his 19-year-old nephew, Balul, played by Qaher Harhash. And everyone in his life wants to meet this model, but he's keeping him away from everyone. This is during the peak times of COVID. I believe they say it's right in 2020. And Terry is scared of everything. He's constantly putting masks on. He's trying to follow protocol. And he has a ton of anxiety about people coming in and out of the house. When he gets food deliveries, he sprays all of the food down and pays really close attention to make sure no one gets sick. Well, at the same time, we are introduced to Carla, who is actually played by the director of the film, Theda Hammel, who tells us about her life through some voiceover narration. She lives at home with her girlfriend, Vanessa, played by Amy Zimmer, who has wrote this book that is all about her life, but she says all of the information that was put in about her is not factual. And so she's incredibly upset that her girlfriend wrote this book about her, that she says none of the information in it is real. And she also wants to meet the model. And so the entire film is people coming in and out of this house trying to meet this model and us learning bits and pieces of information about each character along the way. So as I said, I thought this movie was really entertaining, although it did not work for me as a whole cohesive film. For starters, I will say, I thought the performances in this were all really good. John Early was hilarious in this movie. He did a lot of bodily comedy, just him getting sprayed in the face and knocked over and falling down. And he's really great with his reactions, which makes it very funny. He did a phenomenal job in this movie. I really enjoyed the director's performance as well. I felt like she was so ridiculous and over the top, and her delivery of her dialogue was really great. And because she clearly worked very hard on this material, she was living and breathing this character in a way that I thought was fantastic. And all of the other cast members do a really solid job as well. I think their chemistry is very natural, and so when problems arise, you can kind of feel the history between these people and how long they've known one another, which I think adds to the movie overall. I really liked the social commentary in this film as well. It's saying quite a bit, but I think what really it's a commentary on is white liberal culture and people who, they're trying, but they're not necessarily doing their best to be educated on all social issues. And then in discussing certain social issues, like the flaws that they have, or they feel super educated on a topic, but haven't really done enough research. There's this one scene in particular where they're talking to Balul about where he's from, and none of them know where these locations are. And after that scene happens, you see them trying to look it up. They have a conversation with a cab driver, and he tells them about where he's from. They totally butcher where it's at, and then you hear one of them look up a podcast to try to listen to what's going on in that area. And I think that it shows that there is a want to try and be progressive and to be knowledgeable on certain situations, but how sometimes you just read a headline of an article or you think you know more than you actually do. And I like that kind of poking fun at that, because I think a lot of times people will put themselves in a situation that they think they're all knowledgeable and that they know everything, but everyone has room for improvement and everyone has an ability to be better. And I liked that this was kind of poking fun at that, even at elements of the queer community, which I thought the director, being a member of the queer community, being able to kind of look at it internally and kind of poke fun at certain things, it was really clever, and I appreciated that a lot. But as I said at the beginning of the review, not everything worked for me in this movie. The first thing that didn't really work for me is the voiceover narration. You get voiceover narration from multiple characters in this movie, and sometimes the voiceover narration, while I feel like the dialogue is captivating, it didn't always necessarily parallel to what was going on in a specific scene, and didn't really lead to a place that I felt like was as emotionally impactful as the director was going for. And that's a shame, because there was clearly a lot of time and effort and energy put into these monologue sequences. It just felt like it was there to guide the audience, because so many sequences were just kind of like happenstance moments leading into another moment of just chaos occurring. And so they wanted some kind of through line to connect everything together. But because you're jumping from narrator to narrator, it didn't necessarily feel like it worked as a cohesive through line. The third act is a big mess in this movie, and how things kind of play out. And I'm sure they were trying to say something powerful with it, but for me, I just kind of left thinking, really, that's it? Like, we've got to this point, and it just kind of falls off at the end and it's over. And it just felt really unsatisfying. And also, like, this being one of those COVID movies, I've seen so many of these. They're working with a limited cast and doing what they can, trying to bring that environment to life. But I wonder if this is a movie too that will work a little bit better years after the peak COVID stuff has kind of been over, because we've been so oversaturated in the market with COVID films that it's like anything that even slightly brings it into the mix just feels overdone at this point. And there are some movies that I've watched that have taken place during COVID or that were shot during COVID that didn't feel like COVID films. And this one, with it being such a predominant focal point, I don't know, there was something about it. I'm like, okay, I get that it's a part of life. It's something that we dealt with and that we went through. But I've seen so many of these, and it didn't really do anything other than add more anxiety to the situation. And this film was released this year. I'm not sure when it was filmed, but I feel like it could have been equally as effective if it wasn't set during COVID. Like, you could find other ways to incorporate anxiety into the situation. And that's no fault of the director or anything. They wanted to set it during this time period. That's totally fine. But I'm just kind of burnt out on it, honestly. So that kind of took away from the movie from me a little bit as well, which I know is just a personal thing. But I also think because of the voiceover narration and some of the inconsistency in the narrative, it had a harder time sitting with me as a full film, rather than just some really fantastic sequences, which this movie has a bunch of fantastic sequences that are incredibly hilarious, that had me laughing so hard I almost cried. But I really just wish there was a more structure or more attention to detail in the examination of these characters to create a more impactful piece as a whole. I still 100% think this is worth checking out, because you might get more out of it than I did. I still think you'll laugh and have a good time with it, but I just wish some things were changed to make it a more impactful piece. So have you seen Stress Positions? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was really entertaining, despite the numerous flaws that it has. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.